That day in the forest was the day everything changed. Huh?
Yokai Watch!
10 years ago, on this very day, November 6, 2015, was the day where truly everything changed. As on that day, the Western Nintendo 3DS market finally got its hands on the critically acclaimed monster befriending RPG known as Yokai Watch. Now that it has been 10 years since that fateful day, I feel there is no better way to celebrate Yokai Watch's 10-year anniversary here in the West than by talking about the game that started it all. It's not a perfect game by any means, but this game holds a special place in my heart, as it got localized on my birthday. So as much as I would like to spend my time celebrating my birthday today, I'm gonna obsessively talk about Yokai Watch 1 for 20 minutes. So, I hope you're strapped in. As a disclaimer, I do want to say that this video isn't really structured in any way. This is more so me just giving my thoughts on the series and just talking about it. I don't really have any things in mind to talk about. I mean, I wrote a list of stuff that I'd like to mention for the video, but other than that, this isn't going to get too deep into it. I don't want to make this a huge video, considering this is the first time I've ever uploaded a video like this. But now that all of that is out of the way, let's get into it. I feel there is no better way to start off this video than by talking about the game that started it all, Yokai Watch 1. Yokai Watch 1 holds a very special place in my heart, not just because of the fact that it released on my birthday 10 years ago, but also because it was the game that introduced me to the series, which I guess is kind of redundant to say since it is the first game in the series, but this game does a lot in the short few little hours of playtime that you get from it. It has a lot of staples in the series, in the game, that are frequently touched upon throughout the series. The gameplay, the introduction to the Crank-a-kai, Terror Time, and so many other different types of things all really originated from this game, which is important to mention because this game really is the backbone of the entire series since it is the game that started it all. And I feel that is very important to mention because this game really does do a lot with the short amount of time that it has. Now, something I really want to touch on is just the yokai in general in this game. This game has a lot of iconic yokai that are renowned throughout the entire series in fandom. You have so many classic yokai such as Vinoct, Kyubi, Jibanyan, Whisper, and even some of the bosses like Sproink, Slimeamander, SV Snaggerjag, Wobblewalk, Madaman, and even McCracken, which all originated from this game. There are so many iconic yokai that all just came from this game. And every time I think about Yokai Watch and get it reintroduced to the series, some of the first things that pop into my head about the series are just the yokai that got introduced into this game. And especially, one thing I do also want to mention is the way that it handles bosses. Now, at first when I played this game, I wasn't entirely sure how they would handle bosses in this game, or even if there would be bosses in this game. But it really does introduce you to how cool the bosses are, all with the first boss, Slimeamander. You really get a feel for how each boss is different throughout the series and how you approach each one differently and how you defeat them. Each boss has its own weak points, its own strengths, its own ways of charging up a ultimate. Heck, it even has its own, each one has its own unique ultimates, which are perfect for each character. And really, the one that started it all was Slimamander, who is my favorite yokai, or one of my favorite yokai, because it really does introduce you into the whole concept of bosses by the fact that it has 3 heads, and the one you gotta attack to do damage to it is in one of the 3 heads. So you just keep naturally attacking each one until the weak point shows up and you can beat it. But the benefit of attacking each head and not really getting the eye that, or the weak point that you need to hit, is that you actually decrease and ultimately nullify it having any chance of attacking you, which is really, really cool. Each boss has its own unique way of being able to be defeated or work, and I love it for that. I really, really do. Now, something I do want to touch on about this game is its story, primarily in the fact of how grounded and realistic it is. This game, unlike the future games in the series, has a very grounded story. All of the things that happen to you in this game relate to real life scenarios and ties yokai in with it so expertly that it does such a very good job at doing all of it. Like, it has so, like, there's just so many basic things that happen in real life that they attribute to yokai, and we as the player handle it and are introduced to these different worldviews. Here's a good example. 2 people are fighting, right? Katie and her friend are fighting with each other, right? And that's all because Katie said something that she probably shouldn't have. And it's revealed that it was a yokai that did that, Tattletale, whose entire purpose is telling people the truth. And the way that it solves the scenario is having Katie tell her friend that she's sorry and tell her exactly what she's feeling by using Tattletale, the yokai that is explicitly used to tell the truth, is able to be used to better the situation by having Katie tell her friend exactly how she feels. And it's such a beautifully wrapped up scenario that ends with you befriending Tattletale. And it is such a good, well done story and way that it kind of ties into these real world scenarios and benefits by you later befriending these yokai and using them to fight alongside you, which is something I very much like. One thing I do want to say about the story is that it is a bit episodic in the fact that it doesn't feel like a cohesive story. You do a lot of different things, but all these things don't entirely relate to one another. One thing that also kind of drags the game a bit is the ending. Don't get me wrong, I love this ending, and I think it is one of the best endings in the entire series, if not the best. But the way that it goes about ending the story isn't exactly good. It all kind of stems, like, at first the story is very episodic. You do one thing, you do another thing, and it goes on and on and on, kind of like a TV show. But then when you go to the hospital and you defeat Dr. Manaman, it ends with him saying, "Oh no, I'm so sorry, McCracken," and then he dies, and then you're like, McCracken? And then suddenly Draggy gets a little vision in his little sphere, fortune teller sphere, and then it's revealed that McCracken is taking over the world, and you find out in that instance, and then you're like, oh, okay, now I need to stop him from taking over the world, and then doing all these things, and then you finally defeat him, and then all the yokai are gone, and then you're sad, but then the yokai come back. And the way it goes about structuring the story, from going to episodic to then this huge emotional impact of an ending, it doesn't really connect that well, which is kind of disappointing. But I did overall like the ending and think it is the best ending in the series with how gut-wrenching it is. Now, something I do want to say about this game compared to the other games that I can't really say is that it is so much easier to complete the medallion. Primarily because there are fewer yokai in this game. There are like, I think 150 in this game, or maybe more. I'm not entirely sure. I can't quite remember. But compared to the games later on in the series, this is not that many yokai, and you're able to complete the medallion a lot easier, especially in the fact that you don't have to buy other versions to do that. However, I will say it is harder to befriend yokai in the fact that you aren't exactly able to befriend them easily. Like, the way the befriending system works is you essentially give a yokai their favorite food, they eat it, and then you can tap on a wisp and possibly have a higher chance of befriending the yokai. And you don't know if you've befriended the yokai until the battle ends. And then as you wait in that darkness, hoping for a yokai to be befriended, it just cuts back to the regular gameplay of you wandering around, which I don't think is very good in the fact that it should tell you in the battle if you've befriended them or not, like Pokemon does. The fact that you have to wait until the battle is over sucks because you think that, oh, I did everything right, I put all of this effort in, I did everything right. And then you get to the end of the battle and it doesn't amount to you befriending them. Sometimes you befriend them, but not all the time. Especially with rare ones, you barely get them, which can suck for completing the medallion. They rectify this in later games by having easier ways to befriend them, but this game doesn't really have a good way to befriend yokai in an easy way compared to later games in this series. One thing I do want to mention though, and give full credit to this game, is that not only did it introduce the core gameplay of the series, it also introduced Terror Time. But this Terror Time is unique compared to all the other ones in the series. And I think that Yokai Watch 1 has the best version of Terror Time. Now I'll get into this. So when you go into Terror Time, you have a bunch of drones that you gotta watch out for, and you go through it by getting a bunch of cool items. Huge, really, really good items that could benefit you in the long run that you want to go out of your way to try and get. And even if you get caught, you don't get kicked out of Terror Time. You have the chance to fight Gargaros or Orcanos or Ogreless. You have the chance to fight them. Now in the beginning, when you do get caught, you're gonna get hammered. He's gonna clobber you with his giant frickin' baton. He is going to clobber the hell out of you. And you're probably gonna die almost instantly. But if you actually train up, you can beat Gargaros, Orcanos, and Ogreless. And once you beat them, you get a sense of accomplishment. You get so much XP, and then you're able to wander around Terror Time, getting all of the goodies that you want, feeling accomplished. And it is one of the most satisfying feelings that you can feel, just by beating these bosses that have been a pain in your butt since forever, and you're finally able to defeat them and all of the spoils are yours. And it's not some RNG thing where you have the possibility of getting a good item. You just get good items. And it's just so rewarding in that fact that this game does Terror Time better than any other game in the series. Yokai Watch 1 has the best version of Terror Time. Now, to get into some of the cons for Yokai Watch 1, I do not think that Yokai Watch 1 has an entirely fleshed out combat system. Now, I mentioned before that it is more difficult to befriend yokai. However, there's also just sort of a lack of things that you can do in the game. Your primary goal is to just collect yokai and let them fight for you, but you don't really have any agency on what the yokai do, except for, say, your soultimate. That you can control. However, you aren't given that many options of how exactly you're able to handle combat. Like, you have to use books to persuade your yokai into acting a certain way and doing certain things to increase the odds of them doing it. Like, you can get a book to allow your yokai to inspirit more and cause more negative effects, or you can get a book that can cause them to be more attack based, which I find this well and good that they balance that out, but there's also just not a lot you can do, because all you're doing is kind of waiting for the yokai to just beat the enemy up, and that's it. It's not like Yokai Watch 2 where you have some agency in what you can do by like poking yokai or like doing a supercharged attack using all of the yokai. There's not a lot of things that you can do, and it's very limited in what you can do. I will say that it does somewhat keep you engaged with how it handles stuff, like inspiriting and how you purify, or how you do ultimates, or how you rearrange your yokai. That I find is very cool. But ultimately, Yokai Watch 1 does not have that much of a fleshed out combat system, unfortunately. And something that's also not really fleshed out is the post game. Once you beat the game, there's not really that much to do. There's the Infinite Inferno, which you can get through. But then once you do the Infinite Inferno, that's kind of it. You don't really have anything else. The only other thing that you can do is like fight 2 secret bosses, and that's it. There's not really that much you can do once you've done that. Sure, you can go through Terror Time until you've beaten Ogrelus and Orkanos and Gargaros, but there's not really that much to do, and the game does really lag from the fact that you don't really have anything more you can do once you beat the game, unfortunately. Now, something I do want to get into that I do not like about this game is how the Jungle Hunter system works. Now, it might sound redundant to bring up Jungle Hunter since it doesn't matter that much, but something that I very much do not like, that thankfully the games in the future fixed, is the fact that the Jungle Hunter, the way that you get items or do things in this, do things for it, is you have to do a mini game essentially where you get, you have to do a mini game where you get fish or bugs, right? And both of them are the exact same mini game. It's just random as to whether or not you get it. But when you go to the Jungle Hunter to exchange for items, you have to get specific fish and specific insects, each with its own specific rarities, to be able to unlock specific items and stuff, which can be a nightmare for trying to 100% the game, or even just get basic stuff, which I don't very much like at all. I don't very much like the fact that that exists at all. I'm glad they rectified it in the future games by the fact that you get points by exchanging bugs. I like that you're able to exchange bugs for points as well as fish, depending on the rarity of them, instead of having to trade for them each individual one to get specific items. You have to trade specific insects and fish for specific items, which is something that isn't very good for this game. But this game did a lot to introduce a lot of people to the series, and I can't knock Yokai Watch 1 down for that, because it did a lot with the short experience that it was. And I still thoroughly enjoy this game, even on repeat playthroughs. And with that, that brings this video to a close. I am so thankful to be able to have Yokai Watch as a part of my life. I very much enjoy this series, and I thoroughly enjoy everything that it brought to the table. I am so happy that this game exists and that I was able to experience it here in the West. I am so very thankful, and I am truly glad that there is still a passionate fan base for it here in the West. Hopefully we get another installment someday. Maybe we'll get Yokai Watch 4 whenever. But overall, I'm thankful that this series has been such a big part of my life. And I cannot wait for the next 10 years to come. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you, Whisper. Goodbye, my yokai friends.